Why is this particular quarter important?
It's very important, obviously, because Apple's the biggest company in the world. And to your point, it's not the most interesting one, right? It's not the holiday quarter. It's not the first full quarter of new iPhone sales, but it's the quarter where we find out sort of when the new iPhone is going to be announced. We're going to look at the fourth quarter guidance. We're going to see, is it much higher than expected? Is it lower than expected? If it's lower than expected, more closely to this quarter, we might say, maybe the new iPhones won't come out until October, November like they did last year. But if it's higher, that means we're going to get a few more additional weeks of iPhone sales, new iPhone sales next quarter. So we'd be looking towards some of the higher guidance for that.
Now, walk us through what the iPhone is doing. I mean, there's always concern about how the best model, the iPhone 10 at this point, is doing. But it also seems that people are now really buying into this idea of a family of iPhones, and they don't necessarily need to have the best one.
Right.
Quote unquote the best one, the most recent one.
And we're going to learn a lot about that based on the ASP, the average sales price. So the ASP last year was $606, and so some analysts are projecting $690 this year, which would be obviously an almost $100 leap. The iPhone 10, $1,000, which would mean the iPhone 10 is a very strong contributor to the iPhone mix. If it's lower than expected, that could mean, maybe Apple's selling more of the older phones, the 7s or the cheaper 8s. So we're going to get a really nice picture of that once we know the revenue and the ASP numbers.
And you're expecting them to reveal a bigger iPhone 10 in the September quarter.
That's exactly right. So in the September quarter, 3 new phones. They're all going to be sort of like the iPhone 10. The one's going to look just like the iPhone 10, same size, same whatever, faster processor, camera, et cetera, et cetera. There's also going to be a cheaper one that looks like that one, almost a little bit thicker bezels, but it's going to have Face ID. They might call it the iPhone 9 and will replace the iPhone 8. Then there's going to be a very high-end phone, which would probably be north of $1,000, the most expensive phone, probably the most expensive phone on the market, actually, with a giant screen, 6.5 inches. A lot of people in Asia are going to be interested in that model because that is a single device sort of ecosystem. So that's going to be a strong seller, both in the US and internationally.
So where is the long-term growth going to come from? Is it still going to be the iPhone, or is it going to be services or something else?
It sounds like it's not going to be the iPhone. Based on every analyst we've spoken to, they're expecting growth from between 0% to 5% on an annualized basis for the next 5 to 10 years, which is not necessarily a bad thing, unless the iPhone starts, dipping down and losing 10% of sales annually, then it's a bad thing. But if it's pretty stagnant, that's a good thing if they're adding an additional layer on top, whether that's services, augmented reality glasses, something in self-driving cars, something in television, that really is a new driver to year-over-year growth.
So what are analysts expecting in the fourth quarter?
For the fourth quarter, they're expecting guidance in the $50 billion range. They're expecting a few weeks, 2 to 3 weeks of iPhone sales in the September quarter, which would seem to indicate strong year-over-year growth. They're expecting 15 to 17% year-over-year growth for the quarter, making it the strongest third quarter for Apple since 2015. So overall, they're expecting it's going to be a pretty inline, pretty good quarter for Apple.
We've been following the Apple versus Amazon march to $1 trillion. I was just speaking with Gary Vaynerchuk, investor earlier, who's like, Tim Cook is good and all, but Jeff Bezos is awesome. Tim Cook's come up with what? AirPods and the Apple Watch, and look at everything Jeff Bezos is doing. What do you think of that assessment?
That's an interesting question. Tim Cook has definitely steered the ship in the right direction. He hasn't taken it off course. I think if you're anyone, not necessarily only Tim Cook, succeeding Steve Jobs, who's known as perhaps the greatest inventor of the last 100, 200 years, since the guy who invented electricity, that's a very difficult act to follow. And I think it could have been very easy to ruin. I think, just because they have so much cash in the bank doesn't mean it's necessarily easy to keep the company not only afloat, but take them into new areas, grow it. I mean, we're talking about extreme amounts of money that other companies aren't reporting. So from that perspective, it's pretty good. But I think what Gary is talking about are 10, 20 years from now, where's the new innovation, the new types of categories going to come from? And we haven't exactly seen that from Apple to date, but we have from Amazon recently.